Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review, and today we're taking a look at the Mojawa Mojo 2. Not to be confused with the Cord Mojo 2, this is a very different device because this is a bone conduction earphone / headphone. Quite some time ago on the channel I reviewed the Naenka Runner Pro and I wasn't overly impressed. I found them to be a little bit bass shy, which all of these headphones are, as I'll talk about soon. And also on top of that, I found that they didn't do a very good job of overcoming ambient noise. So I was interested to see if the Mojo 2 had fixed those issues, and the answer is yes and no. So let's jump in and talk about what they've done better and what's still the same. The Mojo 2 retails for $150 US. It's this guy here. And as I said before, it's a bone conduction headphone or earphone. I'm not sure what you want to call them, whether you want to call them earphones or headphones. They go over and around the ear. They don't go in your ear, but they're not really full-size headphones either. So I'm likely to refer to them interchangeably as headphones and earphones. As you'd imagine, for a product like this with no wires, it is a Bluetooth-based device. And according to the marketing, these will give you 8 hours of use in between charges. I've certainly found them to have plenty of battery life for my usage. They also have IP67 dust and waterproof ratings, and what that means is that they're completely dustproof, and they'll handle submersion in water for up to 30 minutes at a depth of up to 1 meter. So you technically could use these when swimming. I haven't tested that, I'm afraid. But it does mean that if you're out running, exercising, doing something sweaty, or in the rain, either way, you can wear these and know that they're completely safe. While I've got these in my hands, let's talk about the fit and the functions of these. The first thing I should mention is that they attach or sit over your ears like so. And then from there, you've got a couple of interface buttons, or an interface button and an interface touch panel. So on the left-hand side, the button on the actual earpiece is a press button. That's your on-off button. It's also going to allow you through multiple presses to pause and play, or skip forwards or backwards through tracks. And then on the other side of the device, the volume control is actually the piece here that sits behind the ear. And that's not ideal for me. It's a bit clumsy, I find, to have to reach behind my ear for the volume. It's very easy to touch in front of your ear. It's actually a bit fiddly to go behind your ear, so it's probably something you'd get used to over time, but I'm so used to wireless earphones that every time I go to adjust the volume, I want to do it on this piece that sits in front of the ear, not the piece that kind of is tucked right in behind the ear. Once you do remember where you're touching, it's a great system. It's just a simple swipe up or down because it's kind of a long section. And so it is very intuitive once you remember where to go, but inevitably every time I went to change the volume, I'd go to the front of my ear first and then remember that I had to go to the back. So I just thought I'd mention that. Be prepared for that if you buy a set of these. Now, whether you're going to want to buy a pair of these though, comes down to two things in my opinion. First and foremost is, are they comfortable to wear? And secondly is, how do they sound? And the good news is that on both counts, they're pretty solid. The comfort for these is much better in my opinion than what I found from the Naenka Runner Pros. The Runner Pros just put a bit too much pressure on the skin at the very top of the ear, or cartilage. I'm not sure which part exactly was feeling the pressure. But as I wore the Naenka Runner Pros for an extended period of time, I did feel they got a bit uncomfortable. On the other hand, the Mojo 2 here is a much more comfortable headset. It's a very similar shape. I think maybe looking at them, it's not quite as sharp of a curve over the ear, or maybe it's just how it sits and the fact that it's a bit lighter and smaller. But either way, I've been able to wear these for a couple of hours, no problems at all. And while I was wearing them for a couple of hours, I was able to listen to all sorts of different music. I tried some jazz, some hip hop, some general sort of pop rock type stuff, and they handled it really well. One of the things that I said about the Naenkas quite some time ago when I reviewed those was that I felt like they were really only good for things like podcast, audiobooks, where you're only looking for the vocal range to be effective. And that's largely because bone conduction struggles to get deep bass. But the good news is that the Mojo 2s perform a lot better in that space. They're still not good for bass. So when I was listening to, I think it was Nas King's Disease 2, I think it is, the follow-up album from the original King's Disease, when I was listening to that, it wasn't giving me a lot of the bass, but it gave me enough to feel a bit of the rhythm. And what it also did was give me really good access and insight to the vocals, which on a genre like hip-hop is actually really helpful. And so they're not a headphone or earphone that I would recommend for bass lowers as such, but they do have enough that they don't sound quite as disembodied as something like the Naenkas. And the Naenkas are fine for what they are, but I do think we're seeing some improvements in the technology when we move to the Mojo 2. And specifically, one of the things I wanted to do now was give you a sense of the difference in frequency response between these. I can't measure their frequency response on my rig like I do with IEMs or headphones. And so what I did instead was I went through a series of tones and listened to them, and just from ear, I tried to work out where the bass kicked in on these, where it dropped away, which frequencies were more obvious or less obvious. And what I found was that the Naenka Runner Pros really started rolling off significantly everywhere below 200 Hz. And in case you're wondering what that sounds like, I'm going to start tweaking the audio now to show you what I hear from the Naenka Runner Pros just with my voice, and then I'll do a quick musical demo too. So with my voice, the Naenka Runner Pros sound a lot like this because they taper off at 200 Hz. Whereas when I went through the frequency range with the Mojo 2, it was much, much stronger. And this is more like what I was hearing from the Mojo 2. Specifically, they actually start to produce sound all the way down at 60 Hz. I know that doesn't sound that deep when you're used to normal earphones and headphones, but for bone conduction, I think it's excellent. By the time you hit 80 Hz, they're getting significantly louder. And then there's another good step up at 100 Hz. There then seems to be a bit of a dip between 100 and 250 Hz for whatever reason, and then it rises again at 500 Hz and carries all the way through to about 13 kHz. There will of course be some variations in those frequencies, but it was too hard for me to tell. There weren't significant peaks and troughs like there were in the bass, and so what I'd say is that from about 500 Hz all the way to 13K, they're relatively flat. The treble roll-off then begins at 13 kHz, and the sound is basically gone by 15 kHz. Whereas on the Naenka Runner Pro, it actually continues up to 16 kHz. So those don't roll off quite as fast in the treble, but I do think that regardless, the Mojo 2 is the better all-round sounding earphone. Trying to work out what gear you should buy next? Have a look at the Passion for Sound Recommends link down in the description below. Clicking on the link will take you through to my Patreon page, and specifically a post where you can click on the Airtable image to go through to my recommended product database. Once you're in the database, you can use the filter button up the top to choose which sorts of product types you want to have a look at, maybe headphones, maybe DACs, maybe amps. Choose the one or ones that you want to see from this list, and then you can also sort the list by price if you want to, or other features as well. You'll then see a consolidated list just of the product types you want to have a look at, including things like what the retail price was when I last checked. You've got links to my reviews of each product, and then also links to where you can go and buy them. Feel free to play around with the filters and sorting options as much as you like to find the gear you're looking for, and I hope that this database points you in just the right direction for you. So happy hunting, happy listening, and now let's get back to the review. And so in order to put this into context in terms of music and audio, let me play a little bit of music now, and I'm going to actually show you what I perceive that I'm hearing. This is not going to be perfectly accurate, but what I perceive I'm hearing in terms of differences between the Naenka Runner Pro and the Mojo 2. Again, not to knock the Naenka Runner Pro, but just to show you how far the Mojo 2s have come. So having heard what you just did from the musical example, hopefully you'll hear what I'm hearing, which is that the Mojo 2 isn't bad for what it is. Bone conduction earphones are always going to be different compared to IEMs and headphones because of the way the sound is actually getting to your brain. I quite enjoy the experience, but some will find it off-putting at first listen. And that's because everything kind of happens inside your head. They're not going to deliver the same cues to your ears that you get from having sound waves pass around your ears and past your ears, through the ear canals and to your eardrums. And so it is a different experience, but it's one that I quite like. One other mixed bag in terms of both a benefit and a negative is that because they're not closing off your ears or covering your ears, it means you can hear everything going on around you. That's fantastic for hearing what's happening in the world. If you want to be able to hear people talking to you, if you want the safety of hearing cars and traffic, they're great. But what it also means is that the earphones themselves are competing against ambient noise. And so it might mean you're going to be turning them up a fair bit to get enough volume to get over ambient noise. And then that can raise an issue that happens to all of these, and that is that they actually start to vibrate against your skin to the point that they can tickle a bit. So if you are listening to a genre like, say, hip-hop that I mentioned before, where there's particularly rhythmic and powerful bass, if you need to turn them up beyond, say, about 60-70% in my experience, you're going to start feeling this actual physical sensation of them vibrating against your skin. And so they're a little bit limited in the sense that you can't get super duper loud with anything with any bass content, but you also might need to get quite loud to overcome ambient noise. Or you're going to have to wear earplugs, in which case it's a completely different sonic experience again, and it also kind of defeats the purpose of having these in the first place. In that case, you might as well go to IEMs and enjoy the isolation and the full range sound that IEMs can give you. And so to draw all this to a close, where I see these being really helpful is in a situation where you want to hear what's going on around you, where you're not worried too much about bass, but you do want to have some music or some audio. As I said before, podcasts, audiobooks are fantastic through these. They're not great for noisy environments. I find that even things like going for a walk near traffic, like busy traffic, or riding a bike where there's going to be wind noise, I actually find it drowns out most of the sound from these, or you're turning it up so loud that you're starting to feel that vibration. And so for me, where these really excel is in a situation where you're in a quiet space. You might be moving, you might not be moving, but either way, the environment around you is quiet enough that you can hear what's going on with these without having to block your ears. If you have to block your ears, I'd just go straight to IEMs. Another place these can be excellent is in an office environment where you want to hear what's going on around you, you want to know if somebody's talking to you, but you also want to enjoy, say, a podcast, an audiobook, maybe you're watching videos for learning at work, and you want to be able to hear what's going on, but also hear the media. That's where they're fantastic. And the fact that the Mojo 2s actually bring enough bass to give everything a bit of body and presence just makes them that much more enjoyable. And so to bring this to a close, I think the Mojo 2s are an excellent step forward in terms of affordable bone conduction earphones and headphones. I'm afraid I haven't been able to compare them to the Aftershocks. I would have loved to, but I've reached out to Aftershocks before and they haven't wanted to send me demo samples. And so for now, all I can say is that compared to the older and from memory cheaper Naenka Runner Pro, which is fine, the Mojo 2s are significantly better. And so if you've dabbled around with the idea of using bone conduction earphones or headphones, then I do think these could be worth giving a go. As always, I'll put links in the description down below, and thank you to anyone that uses them. I think they'll be affiliate links. I actually haven't checked that yet. But if they are, and if you use them, thank you for your support of the channel, and I hope you enjoy your Mojo 2s. Before I completely wrap up here though, and I know this is a bit of an afterthought because it's a bit of an afterthought, and that is that I forgot to mention that in the box, there's also a charging cable. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's a magnetic charging cable. It's the same that all of these seem to use. And all you do is you take it and you attach it to the inside of the volume control side of the earphones, and then plug it into a USB socket of your computer or a phone charger. And so that's all there is to say about the Mojo 2. Hopefully you found the video useful, interesting, or helpful. And if you have, as always, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button, consider subscribing, and ring the notification bell if you haven't already. But for now, let me leave it to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.